There need to be more people at college universities saying no. On a moral standpoint, this guy is a terrible human being to be the leader of young men. And if you're going to cover up more of his bad humaning and bad leadership, because there is nobody who can tell me Urban Meyer is fit to lead young men. He is fit to win football games, that's fine. But if that's your only objective as a college football program, then you need to take the tag of amateurism off and pay the damn kids. Because if that's all you're worried about, when you go into those homes and you continue to say, well, we're offering you a free education and we're going to help mold the minds of these young men and we're going to help make them the leaders of the next generation, you're fucking lying when you allow a guy like Urban Meyer, human trash, to run your program.
The only thing that scares me about him is he loves hunting, which means he has guns. And eventually, he's going to wind up snapping, too.
No, see, you're wrong. He's not the kind of personality snap. You know why? Doesn't care. He honestly doesn't seem to care about anything. He doesn't care about winning football games. He doesn't care about feeding goldfish.
Oh.
It's time to get things started on the most sensational, inspirational, celebrational, motivational.
Welcome back to the Off Base Sports Podcast. As always, I am your host, Jason Benicki Critchlow. Please subscribe, rate, and review to the podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, CastBox, Satchel, Spotify, YouTube. All of those places is where you can find the podcast. You can also follow us on Facebook, the Off Base Sports Podcast page, on Instagram and Twitter at Off Base Sports, and share it with your friends. We want to grow the audience even bigger, even better. And as promised, I told you I'd have you a show for you this Thursday, even if it was just me. It's going to be just me this week, so I wouldn't expect it to be too terribly long, but we shall see, because there's not a whole lot to cover in sports right now. I guess we can start with the most important thing to me, which is Notre Dame finished the season at 12-0, pretty much locking themselves a spot into the college football playoff. And it's kind of funny to me because as a Notre Dame fan, you haven't won a national championship since 1988. And of course, say 6, 7, 8 years ago, there was all this discussion surrounding, is Notre Dame still nationally relevant? Are they still a big brand? Do they still matter to college football, you know, with what the SEC has become and what that means to sports? And a lot of the consensus was they weren't nationally relevant. They hadn't been important in a while, and they weren't gonna be able to succeed at the highest level given their academic constraints, not being part of a conference, just their geography in general. And again, that the younger generation didn't remember what or who Notre Dame was. So to them, to a lot of people, that seemed like it was going to be an impossible standard to overcome. And then yet now here we are twice in the last 6 years, 2012, 2013, and now 2018, 2019 seasons, where Notre Dame's going to go into the postseason with a chance to compete for a national championship. There aren't a lot of teams that can say that over the last decade, that they've had two bites at that apple. Now, they didn't win, obviously, against Alabama in 2013. I don't think they'll win this year. I don't think they're at that peak level, but it just being in that competitive atmosphere, that competitive realm, is something that not a lot of teams can take credit for having accomplished. So I think that's something to hang your hat on if you're a Notre Dame fan, particularly after being told for years that you're not going to be relevant anymore, that you're not going to be able to compete because your academics are too tough, your geography's not there, that you're not nationally relevant anymore. I mean, granted, yes, all these college football games are on TV, and that's important, and it's helped the exposure of all these other schools, but it still doesn't quite bridge the gap for Notre Dame having a total national network. When they're on NBC 7 times a year, they are the only thing on NBC coast to coast. On NBC streaming platform, they are the only college football game on there. They are not competing for attention. They don't have to be the big dog. And even if you got, SEC network or Big Ten network or all these other networks, they're still regional networks at that point. So it's more exposure for those schools, but still not the same level. And it shows that Notre Dame's always been able to recruit at the highest level, and that they've been able to compete, consistently. Even if, again, they won in 88, they probably should have won in 93. They've had other years where they've had 9, 10, 11 wins. And again, just as recently 2012 and now this year, they're right there in that going into the postseason with a chance at a championship. That's a lot more than a lot of schools can say. But speaking of the college football playoff, I would be remiss going into college into the championship weekend not saying let chaos reign supreme. I don't know about the rest of you, but I surely hope that as this weekend goes on, we get to watch a whole lot of chaos go on. Because, no matter what happens, Alabama's locked in. Clemson is probably 99.5% locked in, even if they lose. And Notre Dame is 99.5% locked in. Can't call anything 100% until it happens, but it would take something really strange for an undefeated Notre Dame team to get left out. But strange things happen all the time. It's an imperfect world. Imperfect things happen, and they will continue to happen. But so, you have right now Georgia at 4, Oklahoma at 5, Ohio State at 6, Michigan at 7, and UCF still getting the ultimate disrespect of being 8. Now I get it. UCF's starting quarterback is done for the year. They still went out and finished thumping Cincinnati or whoever they played last week, and they've got one more chance to say, hey, look here, we still belong in this conversation. So I think to diminish what they've accomplished by putting them 8 behind a Michigan team. Now, granted, Michigan's 2 losses are against very good teams, and we'll get back to that. But just lost by 23 points, and it was their second loss of the season. It's just been a little disrespectful to what UCF has accomplished this year. I don't even want to talk about the fact that they haven't lost a game in 2 years. In 2 seasons, they have not lost a game. They are, again, another undefeated major college football team this year, and they are going to get treated like, yeah, thanks for showing up. We don't care. You really think you accomplished anything? No, you didn't. We're fine without you. But it's going to be the way it's going to be. They're not going to get their due. They're not getting their due respect, and it's going to be what it is. So I think, that's why I want to see chaos reign supreme. I want to see Alabama absolutely throttle Georgia. I want to see Northwestern pull off an upset against Ohio State. And I want to see Texas beat Oklahoma for the second time. Because now you're going to have 5 teams for that 4th spot. Because even if Georgia gets throttled, they're going to still say, well, we only lost 2 games in the SEC. By the way, the SEC is garbage this year. The SEC is beating nobody out of conference. But they're going to act like, oh my God, it's the SEC. It's the most important college football conference. They're all great because they keep beating each other. But there's no one who has actually proven against their mettle against another team, another conference, another big opponent. And I know a lot of rankings and polls and all of that is circular logic, which is why I refuse to really recognize a 4-team +1 system as a playoff. It's not. A playoff would be at least 8 and probably 16. I love 16 because then you just put all 10 conference champions and you stop this Power 5 snobbery. You put the Power 5 in, the, Group of 5 in, and then have 6 at-larges. If they can do it in 1AA where they ride buses to the games or don't have nearly the resources. I shouldn't continue to say they ride buses anymore. I'm sure that some of them even have some better budgets now than they used to. But again, they don't have the budgets the Division I schools have or football bowl subdivision schools have. That's just the reality of it. And you can accomplish that 16 team by getting rid of the conference championship games and the automatic bids go to the regular season champions, and then have your 6 at large. If you're arguing over team 17, who cares? But anyways, back to the circular logic of the SEC schools. Georgia's gonna have a case if they're at 2 losses, to Alabama, and I don't even remember who their second loss is to. But anyways, they're gonna say our only losses are, in the SEC, and we deserve a chance because we played in the toughest conference and we won our regular season division, and there's everybody else is at least 2 losses. I'm sorry, it's LSU, and they got throttled by 20 to LSU, and they're going to sit there and say, well, we deserve our chance, at the national championship, even though we just lost to Alabama by a lot. We lost LSU by a lot, who's not in this discussion. And if somehow they would have, if Georgia would somehow try to retain a right to say we deserve the 4 slot, then LSU would try to insert themselves, saying, well, we lost only 2 games and it was to SEC schools and we beat Georgia, so we should be in that discussion. And one of ours was a 7 overtime loss due to the 2-point rule, and you get into this reasoning, and then if Ohio State loses, now they're going to have losses to Northwestern and Purdue. You're out. Sorry. You've lost all argument. I don't care that you won the Big Ten regular season. I don't care that you throttled Michigan by 23. If you end up with 2 losses to Northwestern and Purdue, and particularly losing to Purdue the way you did, you don't deserve to be in that discussion. In all fairness, I would say they're hard-pressed for me to be in that discussion even if they win the Big Ten, given how bad they lost to Purdue. I get you want to look at who the team is now and how they're performing today, but in reality, you're going to just run into these occasions that you shouldn't be able to get over that hump of losing like that. I'm sorry. End of discussion. But hopefully, again, like I said, in my dream scenario, Georgia gets throttled. Ohio State loses to Northwestern, and Oklahoma loses to Texas for the second time for the year. Now, Oklahoma would, of course, say, well, they're our Achilles heel. They matched up against us right. This is a team with a ton of athletes that's been improving. I know their season hasn't gone the way they planned, but, we still deserve our chance. It's just this one team that has our number. Ignoring the fact that they've given up, somewhere like 25,000 points in the last month on defense. And that is taking them some really lucky breaks to be a one-loss team. They probably should have lost to West Virginia, but Dana Holgerson has some issues with discipline on his team and keeping his team under control. See the wide receiver blocking the guy 20 yards out of bounds. And I know Pat McAfee tried to make a case where, well, so that's just a guy finishing the play. You're 10 yards out of bounds. You're not finishing the play. They would have given you a couple. But you kept going and going, and that was just now you had lost your control. Whatever the guy had been saying to you all game had gotten to you, and you were like, I'm going to prove it to you. I can block you, da-da-da-da-da. You were trying to make a point, and instead of the coach having a moment where he just called you out for it, instead he basically just, you're right back in the next play, and the rest of the world went, what the fuck? Are you going to let your team be ran by the inmates? Of course you did. So why would you let them do that? I don't know. I don't understand, but it is what it is at this point. There's not a whole lot you can do about it. Oklahoma has made it this far. But again, if you have 2 losses to the same team, both times on neutral sites, I find it hard-pressed for you to make a case to be in the playoff, again, over an undefeated UCF team. And then, of course, if all 3 of those teams lose, Michigan's going to be sitting there saying, well, we're number 7. All the teams in front of us lost. We didn't lose. We've only got 2 losses. A close game to Notre Dame, playing with their now backup quarterback, who has proven to be a worse fit for their offensive system, and a 23-point shellacking to Ohio State, who turned out, who again has got throttled by Purdue, and Michigan had a couple of close calls along the way as well. But close calls are close calls. Championship teams find ways to win those close games. They did, but again, 23 points to Ohio State and losing to essentially Notre Dame's backup quarterback. I get it. They're probably the best 2 losses of that group of 4 there. But again, I go back to UCF, who has 0 losses. 0 losses, and has every right to stake a claim to be the 4th team, and would again get overlooked, but then would go to a, January 1 group of 6 bowl, probably win again, and then everybody would make excuses when they claimed another national championship. Everybody would be like, well, but they're just claiming a fake national championship. See Alabama for that, who claimed a couple of them, 2 or 3, like 25 years after they won them. It's like, nah. And just to remind everybody that, yes, Alabama and UCF in the NCAA record books are co-national champions for last year. So anybody who thinks this +1 format gives us a better result than the BCS era or the pre-BCS era just doesn't understand how the NCAA rules work for college football. Basically, all anyone has to do is be declared a national champion in any one of the major polls or computers and claim it themselves, then the NCAA puts you in the record book as a champion or co-national champion. Again, 16-team playoff solves all this. So I want to see chaos reign supreme, mainly because you keep hearing the media talking about, well, the end result will be 8 or 5 Power 5 conference champions and 3 at large. That odds are that would get UCF in this year if you had all 5 of your conference champions and then Notre Dame, then that leaves 2 spots. Yeah, likely UCF would be one of the last 8. And again, I do want my UMCB moment, or UMB, University of Maryland, Baltimore County moment. Yeah, UMBC moment. I want to see those teams have that chance. And again, not even for that one. I don't necessarily care if 16 beats 1 in a college football playoff, but I want to see, 12 beat 5. Which we know happens every year in basketball, which would probably happen, every so often in football since we're not doing 68 teams. And again, basketball could do 68 teams, play 3 full weekends in a row, and nobody is concerned there. But in football, somehow if we had to play 4 weekends, and just on Saturdays, by the way, not Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then Saturday and Monday, the last weekend, it's like, wait a minute. If they can do 3 straight weeks of missing class, why can't the football teams do, and they could in theory do it in a manner that leaves them missing 0 class and still leave the bowl structure in place that I think is overbloated and meaningless, and I watch none of anymore, by the way. I don't know how many of you out there watch college football games anymore, but unless I know a team that's involved, I don't watch it. I don't watch any of the January 1 bowls anymore. I try not to watch much of the college football playoff, air quotes, games unless there's a team I'm interested in involved. Just because I don't want to give them the viewership. I don't want to give them the ratings. I don't want to give them the dollars because it's not a playoff. Plus 1 game, so top, is not a playoff. 8 to me would not be a playoff because you're not giving every team a chance. Again, do away with conference championship weekend. It's easy peasy. You're going to make that money back up in the round of 16 because, again, in the round of 16, let the top 8 seeds have a home game. So now they get more ticket revenue, more TV revenue, and then you move for the 8-4 and championship game to neutral sites. Use bowl sites for those. And again, don't revisit any bowl sites in the same season like they're doing now. Sorry, if you've got a bowl game, it's going to be the bowl game that will be the championship game. Because instead of, when you go to the Fiesta Bowl site twice in the same year and have the Fiesta Bowl and then the championship game, of course the Fiesta Bowl is going to do well because it's still the Fiesta Bowl, but it's not going to do as well as it would be if the Fiesta Bowl was the championship game. So I am not a fan of the bowls. I wish they would go away. They are meaningless. They're just a way for coaches to save their jobs. Similar to adding 4 teams to the end of the NCAA tournament when they added more conferences to college basketball, they got automatic bids. So they wanted more at-large bids, so the power conferences. Because again, all of these things are for power conference teams. Don't get me wrong. There are more bowl games now that accept more group of 5 teams. But it's always about the Power 5 in college football. It's always about the big conferences in basketball. It's not about the little guys. Adding 4 extra at large was not meant to help UMBC get in. UMBC got in by virtue of winning their conference championship. Congratulations. They weren't ever getting an at-large bid. I mean, there are years where they try to find every way they can to justify not taking 2 teams from some of these smaller conferences in college basketball, and guarantee you they would not take in a 16-team playoff. They still would not take a second team from a group of 5 conference. All 6 at-large bids would be either an independent or a Power 5 conference team every time. So that's why, and if they even went to 8, it would be really hard for a group of 5 school to get in there. It would probably take something similar to UCF going 2 straight seasons undefeated, which it shouldn't be. Again, it is a national championship for 1 season. It shouldn't have to be a legacy award or a lifetime achievement award or, hey, you've been undefeated 2 years, I guess we have to let you in now. It shouldn't be that. It should be what the teams did that year. And if you do 16 teams, there's no leeway. Give all 10 conference championships. Okay. And again, even if you go round of 16 at the home teams of the top 8 seeds, then you have 4 6, 7 games. So you can still use Rose, Fiesta, Sugar. Rose, Fiesta, Sugar. I'm trying to blank on Orange Bowl. Wow, can't believe I forgot the Orange Bowl. So, out of your 7, you got your first 4 there. Rose, Fiesta, Orange, Sugar, Cotton, Peach, and throw in one Citrus. I don't care. Pick the 7 bowls. Again, we don't have to work out all the fine details on the air here. But, I did just want to take some time to talk about that. I do want to do, again, I think to me right now, it should be, if everything holds serve, and Alabama and Clemson win this weekend, and it should be Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, UCF. You have 4 undefeated teams left. Let's let them go play. Let's see who the last undefeated team is standing. Then you would have a clear national champion. I don't care if Oklahoma wins. I don't care if Ohio State wins. I don't care about any of that. I think, in reality, if you're going to do 4, and you have 4 undefeated teams left, then those are the 4 that play. It shouldn't even be that hard. They should be able to sit there, look at the system, and say, "Oh, hey, 4 undefeateds. We shouldn't even have to argue this. This should take 2 minutes to put together. Done. Boom. Thanks. Let's play. Get it lined up and go." But again, it's all about protecting the Power 5. And again, if you only had 2 conferences in, 3 conferences got shut out of the playoff, air quotes. They would, of course, expand to 8 tomorrow and still try to do everything they could to leave the group of 5 schools out. So, yeah, until I can see a true system where a team like Butler, who clearly, if they had only done a 16-team college basketball playoff, would have never gotten in, yet back-to-back seasons played for a championship because they ran the gauntlet. I want to see teams have that chance. I want to see if a UMBC can happen. I want to see if a Butler can happen. And until then, again, I'm not going to watch any extra bowls. I'm not going to watch any of the playoff games that doesn't have my team in it. And I don't care. End of discussion. And again, we'll obviously revisit that next week when we have our Final 4. And I'll even try and make some picks for you guys. That way we can all have a little fun with that. Follow up and see if there's any bets to be made and some friendly wagers to be had, let alone actual betting money, where you can go on to mybookie.ag and play for all your betting needs. Use the promo code PAT and get your initial deposit up to $1,000 matched for 50%. So you put in $1,000, they give you $500 to gamble. That's only for a limited time. So as I said, mybookie.ag, promo code PAT. You play, you win, you get paid. All right. So transitioning away from college football, I am going to finish up. I think I'm going to try and keep this to just a couple topics, keep it a little quicker since it's just me, so you don't have to listen to me talk forever and ever. But there was some talk recently by Dana White. He did about possibly there being some snafus or some struggles on getting the Daniel Cormier Brock Lesnar fight made. I don't care, to be honest. I started looking the other day at some of these possible upcoming cards, and I got really excited for what's already been announced, some of the things that are in the works, and what we have coming up. So we have UFC 231 coming up. We're going to have Max Holloway and Brian Ortega, and you're going to have Shevchenko versus Jacek. Now, if that doesn't get you excited for a fight card, I can't help you. You've got 2 good fights going. Again, I don't know how good Jacek will do against Shevchenko. I think their kickboxing records against each other kind of tell a tale, but mixed martial arts is a little different than kickboxing, even though they're both more stand-up fighters. And Shevchenko is a little bit naturally bigger fighter. I'm still excited to see that. I'm excited for that fight way more than I would have been if it would have been Sahara Eubanks at UFC 230. So I'm glad we got to avoid that debacle, particularly after Eubanks missed weight by almost 3 pounds. 2 pounds for that fight, but 3 for championship weight. So I'm going to stick with that since he was supposed to be in a title fight and made a big deal out of being in it. Then you get to follow that up with 232, where you get Cyborg versus Nunez, and that's the undercard title fight for, of course, the return of the man, the myth, the legend, the wild, self-proclaimed wild boy, John Jones versus Gustafsson. Which again, if those two fights don't get you excited, I can't help you. You clearly are not an MMA fan. You're definitely not a fight fan, and there's nothing I can do for you. Again, I don't know how good Cyborg versus Nunez will be. I think it'll be her Cyborg's toughest test yet, just because I think Nunez is a really good striker. But I think Cyborg's size, Cyborg's range will all be problems that will come to rear their ugly heads. And then once we turn our calendar just to some of the announced fights or, speculated fights or things that are in the works for the early new year. Again, I mentioned the aforementioned Cormier versus Brock Lesnar. May or may not happen. Would I watch it if it happened? Of course. Am I excited to see it? Only so much. I mean, it would be interesting to see how Cormier would handle a bigger guy like Lesnar, who is also an accomplished wrestler. And I mean that in the actual NCAA sense of the word. Again, a guy who has actually been a UFC champion already at the heavyweight division. Again, I think of course Cormier his ducked Stipe rematch, because that would be a very tough fight. He took Derek Lewis because he knew what he was getting into. He's like, I can wrestle this guy all day. And it didn't even take that much. He got him early in the round 2. It didn't take much effort, much time, and didn't even have to strike him that much with that injured hand, so it worked out well for him. But I would be interested to see that. But again, we have, for potential fights already to kick off the year, and some that are already signed. We already have Ostovich, Paige Van Zandt, which, obviously isn't a big headlining card, but gets a little more attention, obviously, because of Paige Van Zandt getting such a huge push from the UFC early in her career, and now she's on a 2 or 3 fight losing streak. So, it's starting to be make or break time for her. Obviously, with Ostovich coming off of the unfortunate domestic situation, in her home life, all T's and P's to her as she goes through that. That's, I understand her husband's arrested now, but there's still a long road to recovery from that, both physical and mental. So again, all T's and P's, but I'm excited that she got the clearing to go ahead and fight here early in January, and that she wants to take it. You don't want to see anybody's livelihood disrupted because of situations like that. No, she gets a chance to go out, do what she loves, and get a whole lot of support. So that'll be a fun fight to watch, just for the implications for both fighters. Because again, Ostovich isn't on too good of a these are both fighters who are on tenuous ground with the UFC at the moment, record-wise, so we'll see where that goes. Of course, we have Ben Askren making his long-awaited UFC debut versus Robbie Lawler. I think that'll be a fun matchup. I think it's a very big clash in styles. I expect Ben Askren to win that, and I have to say, I wasn't a huge Ben Askren guy when he was over in one taking shots at UFC fighters. Love it now that he's in the UFC. When you're taking shots and you're not going to fight these guys, to me, that's just whatever. You're putting an act on. But once you're in there and you can fight these guys and you're still taking those shots, love it, man. Love it. Do it. Gotcha, man. See, because it could have been fake. You don't know. I've never met Ben Askren, obviously. Never met any of these fighters. Don't know him personally, so I don't know what he's like. But obviously, when you stay the same, once you switch over, huge fan. Going to be excited to see. I expect him to beat Robbie Lawler. I really do. I don't give it a slam dunk. I don't think it's a home run. But I think we've seen time and again that brawler strikers tend to lose to the grappler wrestler types more often than not, because particularly when you're as good of a grappler wrestler as Askren is, because he can get you the ground down there. He can hold you. He can submit you from just about anywhere. So, and I mean, Lawler's, he's got one punch knockout power at 170, but I don't think that's ever been much of an issue for Askren. Again, this is a guy who's been the Bellator 170 champion. He's been did he win the 185 too? I can't remember. I know he was welterweight and middleweight at 1 FC, And again, this is a guy who likes to fight all these weights. I know he's talked about wanting to fight like Khabib at 155. I think that would be a little tough. I wouldn't mind seeing that at a catchweight 165 though, or 162.5, or something like that, where those guys can meet in the middle. I think that's the one thing that UFC is not doing enough of is catchweight bouts. Those are great in boxing where you can get some of these guys to meet in the middle and fight. UFC has the opportunity to do more of that, I think, going forward. Stop trying to get these guys to fit into divisions. Or, again, you know, as Dana White admitted, he's doing away with 125. Open up 165, move 170 to 175, do 185, 195, 205, 225. I don't think anybody would be mad with that. And then you could even do a super heavyweight at 245. I don't care. More divisions, the better. Change the weight cutting rule so we aren't having people miss weight by 2-3 pounds. Sorry about that. I had a little stuffing in my nose. It's rather cold up here in the north. Not a big fan of it. Not sure why I keep moving back up here. Not a fan of the cold. But anyways, you know, I'm tired of watching people go to weigh-ins and struggle to hold themselves up for the weigh-in. Like, I get it. I can't think of her name, but she got cleared at the last fight to fight. But when you're missing weight by 2-3 pounds, when you're not, you know, cutting weight so tight that you're almost, you know, that people are putting their lives at risk, it's time to change the rules. I know I harp on it a lot, but it's not that hard to do, to reclassify these guys, put them in the right weight class, you know, stop letting them walk around at 180 and then wrestle and fight at 145. I think there's no, now granted, some of that is just cutting through weight camp as they are cutting weight through camp, through natural processes of eating healthy or working out more regularly, things like that. But then there's still just, you know, usually 10, 12 pounds of water weight that they're shedding. Stop it. You know, again, ONE FC and NCAA have figured it out. The UFC can figure it out. And I haven't even got to two of my more favorite fights that we have for sure. All right, well, one for sure, one potentially on the books, and I'll even discuss the second potential on the books and then wrap up with the UFC's big announcement for the week. Of course, we have, you know, the upcoming welterweight tilt between Tyron Woodley and he who shall not be named, because as everybody keeps pointing out lately, he's got script writers writing his tweets and his post-fight interviews for him. So I won't mention him, but I can't wait to watch Tyron Woodley wipe the mat with him. Sorry, it's going to happen. It will happen. I think the UFC needs to do more to help make Tyron Woodley a bigger star. Because again, this is a guy who's on TV, who's in, you know, stuntman in movies, who's all around good guy, you know, doing music. He's obviously trying to create as much of a buzz as he can without being a phony fake like the guy he's trying to fight, or being a guy like Conor McGregor who's in the middle of getting his ass whipped. Man, it's just business. It's just business. Like, nah, bitch. This is a fight game. And that brings me to the other fight I'm hoping gets finalized soon, and I can't wait to see, which is Jorge Masvidal versus the GOAT, the General, Nick Diaz. Again, I told you how excited I was for the Nate Diaz return until Dustin Diamond Poirier couldn't make it to war. Again, those were excuses, bro. You could talk about Nate Diaz being hard to negotiate with, him winning different weight classes. You're the one who fought through the same injury in 2 other fights and this time suddenly couldn't make it to war. If you can't make it to the war, you've lost the war. And if you ain't about this life, don't be about this life. In the end, I'm ready to see Nick Diaz fight again. Ready to see Nate Diaz fight again. I'm all in on the Diaz brothers every day of the week. And at some point, Nate Diaz will be back in that octagon this year. There's no way the UFC is going another year, plus their first year with this ESPN deal, without putting him out there. And I know they're cutting down to 12 pay-per-views from 13. I ultimately see that number still shrinking going forward with some of the poor pay-per-view numbers we've seen all around. And then there's, of course, the last one I would be excited to see, is only because I hope it would happen at heavyweight, not light heavyweight, is that Dana White has expressed an interest in watching John Jones beat Daniel Cormier a third time. And by that I mean he wants to see John Jones Cormier 3. Again, I would like to see it at heavyweight, so then there could be an actual, first time light heavyweight and heavyweight champion, because again, Daniel Cormier has never beat a champion to win that light heavyweight belt. He has always been gifted it. It has always been given to him. He has never won it from John Jones. He holds it for a little bit while John Jones is in trouble, while John Jones is under a fake suspension, whatever the case may be. But he's never actually won the light heavyweight championship belt from a light heavyweight champion. So he's only just a heavyweight champion, and I would love to see that fight at heavyweight just so that John Jones could talk some more shit. We could watch Daniel Cormier cry some more, whatever the case may be. And I like Cormier, but clearly John Jones has his number. He's clearly the better fighter. And for him to run around and pretend to be the champ or the double champ or whatever he wants to call himself, like, you were never the light heavyweight champion. You were just a placeholder. And then, like I said, I'm going to finish up with the last piece of news we got out of the Dana White presser or interview this week, where he talked about the UFC moving on from Sage Northcutt and acting like the kid needed to get some more polish and some more work, and then they'd bring him back. Don't let Dana White fool you. He is being offered more money elsewhere. He will make more money wherever he chooses to fight than the UFC was willing to pay him. The UFC would have loved to keep him. They did not continue to push him while he was losing to see him finally start to have the light go on, hit a winning streak, and then be like, we think you need more polish in the minors. That was not the case at all. And this is not to diminish what Sage Northcutt accomplished in turning around his career and starting to become a better fighter. Fight prospecting is tough business, particularly when you're dealing with guys who are 18 to 21, who are still very unpolished, but you're trying to beat, your competitors for the creme de la creme. You don't want to let a guy like Sage Northcutt turn out to be the next Conor McGregor, but an American version, and somehow have, we'll let you season yourself in Bellator. Again, this wasn't a decision by Dana White to move on from him. This was Sage Northcutt getting more money, most likely from ONE FC or ONE Championships or whatever they're calling it now. And Dana White saying, I'm not going to pay that for you. So he could sit there and have all that fake bluster and all that bravado about, well, he needed more seasoning in the minors. If the price was right, he would have still been there. I'm sure, rumor has it he was offered a main event fight against a top 10 competitor, but the dollars just didn't make sense. So he didn't do it. And Sage Northcutt was all about that.
Straight cash, homie.
So Dana White can sit there and play that game. But again, we know what it was about. It was about straight cash. And the UFC is, again, losing one of their more marketable stars. Or at least somebody they thought was more marketable because they didn't want to pay the money to have them in the octagon. Like I said, I'll do that. That'll do it for this week. Thanks for tuning in to the Off Base Sports podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, share it with your friends. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at JASONBANICKI. And I'm going to try something new and play us out with a song every week, and I'm going to pick a different one. This week, I am stealing one from Heartland Radio 2.0 podcast that they do for one of their segments. So here you go. Have a great week, everybody.